Good.
So you know how I'm clearly an Anglo-imperialist.
Say Anglo-imperialist?
Imperialist. In other words, I believe in the British and American uh, moral tradition, and I believe it in, even if it's wrong, in the sphere of international affairs. And of course, you guys tease me about this all the time, or tell me that I'm wrong. I'm not sure it's teasing or just correction.
Okay.
Um, and so there is just this very interesting um, moral conviction among some people. It's like this set of moral convictions, and I'm comparing it to the anti-Trumpers, the Trump derangement syndrome intellectuals,
Okay.
and the internationalists like myself who believe in creating a peaceful world as a means of self-defense. And
Okay.
then you have um, the people who uh, are more isolationist, right?
Okay.
Right, and the people who are rabidly isolationist, right? And so I'm listening to all these people, and these are basically moral positions. What does that mean? It means what's the scope of the responsibility we will bear for the radius of influences on ourselves and others, you know? And so I'm listening to these guys, and listen, you can listen to, for example, Sam Harris, who's become a fucking lunatic.
What's he doing?
He's just taken Trump derangement syndrome to the state of a jilted woman. I mean, it's just, he just can't get off it. He's obsessed with it. And the projection into Trump's mind is hysterical to me. Um, I can see in his mind, I understand how moral that guy is, but he sees himself as doing the moral thing in a very immoral world, right? And so, so I see him from probably his perspective.
What's Harris saying?
I don't know if I can't quote Sam Harris off the top of my head. It's
Okay.
just a day. I mean, just go to his blog or whatever it is, his channel, and listen to the first 3 minutes of any tirade he has, and it's all just Trump derangement syndrome. Which is just he projects stuff. He doesn't understand. He take all these people are taking a feminine, what I consider a feminine or an immature version of uh, of uh, projection onto Trump, who does not think like them at all.
Right.
Trump thinks much like I do. So, and I mean, I know that because I mean, everything he says is completely fucking obvious to me. Um, so, but then again, I'm a hyper moral person, and frankly, he is too.
I think so.
But hyper morality is based on the presumption of what's the sphere of moral people, right? In other words, I might be hyper moral, but I might consider other people increasingly amoral
Oh,
to immoral,
I
right?
understand you. And so I had a conversation that I would like to present
Please.
on this topic, which is it has to do with free will. And it's like this. So free will breaks into this interesting argument because some people believe in it and some people deny it. And it's like, okay, regardless of the existence of free will, people without free will behave like animals as slaves to their passions.
Yes.
Okay. This leaves people who think they have free will and may or may not have free will. But people who wish to behave as though free will were a thing and were real must defend themselves from the animal type people who are driven by their passions, or they will be overrun and destroyed.
Yes.
And that's where we're at. If the via negativa is necessary for the good people to impose on the rest of the people, because the people will do bad things and they will destroy the good people.
Correct.
And it makes no difference if free will exists or not.
So what you're saying is, I'm going to frame it, reframe it a little bit is into the frame I was using, which is that there is not only a radius of expected morality,
Yes,
but there's a radius of ex expressed responsibility,
that's right.
right? And so the problem here can be you can go down um, presumption, I don't know which one is which, presumption of the most of us are moral at one end, and the presumption that most of us are immoral on the other.
Yes.
You can go in, I can take only responsibility for that around me, or I can seek to take responsibility for as much as everything I'm aware of. And I think what you're saying is this third axis, which is, how did you put it? Uh, sorry, what did you just refer to the axis as?
Necessary for the good people to express via negativa to prevent the people driven
Right,
by
so
their passions from destroying
correct.
the capacity for the good people to
Yeah,
mirror.
you meant free will. Yes, that's the responsibility axis. So what about the free will axis?
There's no, it's absolutely not a thing. It doesn't.
Not a thing. It's only those two dimensions that matter. Yes.
Free
And
will
so,
is illusionary. It's irrelevant.
so why am I thinking of this way when I could probably graph it? Yeah, I would end up back with my design of two circles. Yeah, okay. So it's the
And
same.
so if we look at the current state of Northern Europe today and Europe in general, which is being flooded by Africans and third worlders, it's like this. It's absolutely an abrogation of responsibility that is destructive of the people, the civilization which Europe created.
Mhm.
There's no question, but that's what's going on. And it's like and it is prevention of the responsibility taking that the Navy used to impose on England, which is to keep them out, keep
Mhm.
everybody out so that England is English.
Yes. So,
That's
so,
that's what I'm waiting for, the resurgence of that's proper.
well, I mean, that's what these guys are. I was listening to Fukuyama this morning. Um, you guys have got me on this. You dragged me out of bed at all these ungodly hours of the morning. So now I go to bed earlier and I wake up earlier. And so this morning I'm waking up and I go through a bunch of these talks on the subject. And Fukuyama's doing the same thing. And he's
Mm,
saying, well, it's going to end up this way. And I'm like, I don't think it's going to end up that way. I think it's going to correct to the middle. So they always go the opposite direction. So I heard Fukuyama, I heard Jake and Piotr this morning. Who else did I listen to? I listened to Zihan a little bit. I listened to George Friedman. I mean, these are all people, these aren't people that are idiots, right? I mean, these are not idiots. But what you see in them is that two axis difference. And I might say the third axis is um, is comprehension of, in other words, are you are you understanding their incentives or are you projecting them? Yes, that's the
yes.
third one. That's the third axis. And so I think if we break it down into first principles, we have these three axes, and you can see how people are basically presuming some point on that, like just like we are in the political triangle or any other bit of ternary logic.
Right.
And they're projecting onto this projecting onto Trump when the truth is that people like Trump or me, we don't go into politics. It's in other words, we have developed agency in the world. We have developed the agency in the real world, not of credentialists, not of bureaucrats, not of people who are in the talkosphere, but people who have to actually organize people and capital to produce ends that produce greater returns than the inputs that we cast into them. And so I have worked with, I have worked in building companies, large and small to large, right? I have consulted for some of the biggest companies in the world in various ways, and including strategy in those companies with their top people, right?
Right.
I have built those companies. I've worked for justice long enough to realize that there's no such thing in there. And I've worked for Intel, and though you understand that Intel has changed a lot over the past few decades in response to basically 2011 in particular, 2001 in particular. 9/11, 2001 conflated into 2011. How the hell did I do that? Oh, it's because 1911 is stuck in my head with the Federal Reserve. Is that why the association kind of worked? Anyway, so let's get back to reality. So since 2001, so when we realized that we had to reconstruct the intelligence service. So intelligence service has a bunch of people that are actually talking online now, and they're the field people. They're the field people that work in like special operations, right? So we're getting a more movie-centric view of the intelligence than my experience. I basically work with the caliber of people who work in the diplomatic intelligence, right? This is not the same thing, right? These are, all right, so I work with those people. So I have a very clear view. And my view, of course, of the CIA is the opposite of the public, which is, fuck, these guys are amazing. So that's my view of it. So if you look at this, excuse me, and I missed one, and then I've worked with government agencies. I mean, we've worked with the Defense Department, et cetera, large scale, but all the way down to universities and that kind of crap, right? So what you see this is that I see a world where the private sector has a bunch of rich people who are basically gangsters, but who don't use violence. They use monetary and legal force, right? And I have worked with, I see a bunch of people who are basically go to a church America, right? And they cover the whole spectrum of humanity, and they have just like somebody says, but Christianity says this. Yeah, which fucking sect of beautifully about Christianity is like all interpretive religions is you can find in it whatever the hell you want, right? I mean,
That's right.
The five basic principles are the same, but they're not even stated, right? They're not even stated in the religion that is trying to teach you five basic principles. But the truth is that in my experience of the world, it's a fucking corrupt place. So when you're trying, as I did, to sell some sort of truth, that's what you get paid for. You might be telling, you might be investigating some business or technological problem, but the truth is, it's never a business or technology problem. It's always a people problem.
Yeah.
And so what you're trying to use is monetary justification and technological justification to alter the behavior of people whose behavior doesn't want to alter, right? So I see the world very much like Trump does, and I work in tech and finance and economics and intelligence, and Trump works in construction and services, and he works with the basically the worst part.
Oh, yes. Yes.
The worst part of the business. And how do I know this? Because I work in, I did the design work for, I did some of the design work for one of the most popular mass construction software management for the big firms who financed it. And so, which was really interesting. You could get all those major construction companies in the same room, and these are men, right? These are men proper, right? They've come up through the same kind of process Trump came up through. They have a pragmatic view of humanity. And and if you understood the construction business, you'd understand the people in it and how they come up and how they behave. You'd act.
Oh yeah,
If
yeah.
if you understand that you're talking with like politicals, right, bureaucrats and not, right, you're not talking with America, the cream of America's crop ever. Matter of fact, when they asked me to work on Project 2 Degrees and rescue that fucking, excuse me, that catastrophe, I caught myself, that
Good
catastrophe,
work.
um, I said I will, but what I was so frustrated by is that every single government department or private or nonprofit organization that was working on the global warming, which is what we called it at the time, not climate, right? We called it global warming at the time. Every single one of them was simply in it for how much money they could get, and they were willing to say anything to get it. And so I've not been, and when I worked in justice, now I have a lot of respect for the jury system, the American system of law, and and many judges are better than who aren't activist judges are better than you'd think, right? Um, but the reality is that those people, they don't want to work hard. They want to do as little as possible to get as
Right.
many career points as possible with the least effort. I mean, it's what it is. So this is Trump's. I have the same frame of mind as Trump. Does that mean? I mean,
Right. It's human. It's realpolitik, right?
exactly. And so I do when so here's how you and my skill. I mean, if you ask my there's a great movie about me out there on the internet somewhere, made by my staff. If you look at how I negotiate, right, they basically treat me like a fucking, you know, like a terrorist or not a terrorist, a mafioso, right? They basically, and so in the particular movie, it's like I'll try to I want to buy your company, and I turn it around and it's like $1 or $25 or something like that, and they say, and then I said okay, and then in the next scene, the guy's being beat up the guy that I'm negotiating is being beat up in a parking garage by a bunch of hoodlums, and he comes in the next scene with his arm up and bandaged on his face and the blue eye and says, "Yes, we've considered your negotiation," and I'm not doubting that that's how people whose companies I acquired actually felt. There's probably more than a
Right.
grain of truth to it. But anyway, so that's I understand negotiation. And in other words, what I feel most of these people do is they're moral. They have a moral compass somewhere on those three dimensions.
Yes.
But what they do is they project that morality onto others where it doesn't exist. And what's worse is if you have the Anglo model, you have the highest trust model. In other words, what the Russians consider the most naive model
Right.
of negotiating with others. So how do you do that? How do you negotiate with people who are questionable, amoral at best, moral only in status, in obtaining status. In other words, they're going to try to get status points, right? But they're not really moral. They're amoral in most cases and immoral whenever they can get away with it. The way
Okay.
you do that in negotiation is you try to actually uh, uh, come to some set of terms on their terms, right? And you do that by never letting them know what you really are willing to do.
Right.
So the technique I've used in my life, and Trump uses it. I mean, I know. I mean, again, I'm not that different from him. Is that you lay a bunch of data points or examples that give them the impression of what you want, but it's not what you want, right? You lay out a set of goals for them that you have for the both of you, but that's not anything to do with what you want. What you want is something incredibly pragmatic, practical, enforceable, and reciprocal, right? In other words, not Reciprocal is what I want, because I want to make sure that if I've bought your company or done a deal with you, that neither of us is going to get screwed, because at least in my business, word of mouth is very important, and so you want to always have the moral high ground. So when I buy a company, what I do is I do this basic technique, and then I try to drive them toward some deal that satisfies my actual wants on the terms they understand.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And so you're never what I see people doing, these hyper moral guys that are very, internationalists, Christian, do good for everybody. What I see them doing is first projecting falsely upon others, and secondly, negotiating from that position with others, their false presumption from others, and essentially making themselves strategically weak in those negotiations. So
Okay.
I feel like I'm losing you because I've gone on this argument too long, but that's my basic arc, is that I think those three dimensions and Trump's strategy is the strategy I developed. He developed it, and he developed for the same reason. And if you talk to grown-ups, like people who do real things in the real commercial world, that's what we all do to some degree. There are lawyers who are more pissants, right? Because they're trying to show value. And there's CEOs who are more compromising. You watch how Musk negotiates, because their their value is in creating a stable relationship, trade or exchange, right? So you have financial guys that are always trying to get an edge, just like a lawyer is, right? So
Right.
everybody's trying to get status in the private sector, just like they are in the public sector. The difference is that there's a more grown-up understanding in the private sector, and we have more common incentives than the public sector does. So I hope I didn't mean to go off on that long of a rant, but I didn't realize that I would be able to decompose analyze, decompose, and reconstruct from first principles what was actually going on. But so this is going to make a very great clip.
Little short.
It's short. It's 42 minutes.
Well, it's as short as we don't really.
So Uncle Kenny, I want to thank you for forcing Brad to let me to go on these freaking rants. Fucking guy. I love that guy. We got to make sure he comes to more of our stuff. Just to have him in the audience is so worth it. All right. So now that I've talked incessantly for a while, and are there icicles